Breaking tonight, Mark Carney has been elected as the new Liberal leader.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney.
He's earned the support of his party to become the next Prime Minister. But can he earn the support of Canadians coast to coast?
We are fighting for childcare. We are fighting for dental care and pharma care. We are fighting for a strong economy.
Carney won't have much time to celebrate. An election call is expected imminently. His opponents already making their case.
Careful, everybody, because sneaky Mark Carney's going to try to pull a fast one on you.
This while the fight with our once closest ally continues. Its leader relentlessly threatening our economy and our sovereignty.
We may go up with some tariffs.
And so in this consequential moment, Canadians will be asked to choose the individual who will lead this country through an uncertain time.
From CBC News, this is The National with Ian Hanomansing.
Tonight, a new era of Canadian politics has begun. Mark Carney winning the Liberal leadership by a huge margin, setting the stage to become Canada's 24th Prime Minister.
So let me ask you, who's ready? Pierre, who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
Carney took nearly 86% of the vote. In his acceptance speech, he pitched unity while also turning his attention to Donald Trump and vowing to punch back against U.S. tariffs. He also took multiple shots at Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. We have extensive coverage tonight, including the political impact, how voters are reacting, and what comes next. Let's begin with JP Tasker.
Please welcome our final candidate.
The race to replace Justin Trudeau is now over. The final result, not even close.
In first place, the next Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, with 131,674 votes.
Mark Carney is poised to become Canada's next Prime Minister.
I will work day and night with one purpose, which is to build a stronger Canada for everyone.
The former governor of the Bank of Canada crushed his competition, easily winning with a stunning 86% of the votes cast.
And my government will keep our tariffs on until the Americans show us respect.
Carney's first challenge, staring down a new American adversary.
And Canada never, ever will be part of America in any way, shape, or form. We didn't ask for this fight, but Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves. So the Americans, they should make no mistake, in trade as in hockey, Canada will win.
President Donald Trump's 51st state taunts and tariff threats have changed the electoral equation, breathing new life into the Liberals.
From one old guy to another old guy. Stop this nonsense.
Jean Chrétien led Canada through the last referendum on Quebec independence. Now a rally cry in the face of a new national crisis.
Canada will continue to rise through north strong and free. Nobody will starve us into submission, because Canada is and will remain the best country in the world. Vive le Canada!
And the outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came with his own patriotic parting message, urging voters to stick with the Liberals as Canada grapples with an historic clash.
We're a country that will be diplomatic when we can, but fight when we must, elbows up.
His successor echoing that message.
When we come together, we build things that last because we are Canada strong. Vive la Canada. Merci tout le monde.
Carney's victory is impressive. He pulled in a higher share of the vote than what Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre got in his landslide victory. It's also higher than what Prime Minister Justin Trudeau got when he won more than a decade ago. Those two men are expected to sit down early this week to discuss the handover of power, and then Carney and his cabinet will be sworn in later this week.
And JP, an election could come soon after that.
Yeah, a federal election call is expected sometime before the end of the parliamentary prorogation on March 24th, setting up the country for a possible spring election. Ian?
J.P. Tasker in Ottawa tonight. Before the election call, there'll be a series of events in Ottawa set to begin this week. First up, Justin Trudeau is expected to meet with the Governor-General to officially resign as Prime Minister in the coming days. Mary Simon will then invite the new Liberal leader to form government. Mark Carney will need to make quick decisions on his cabinet, and then he and those ministers will be sworn in. Parliament resumes from prorogation March 24th, but Carney could call a federal election before then. If that's the case, once the writ drops, the election campaign will last between 37 and 51 days, with the vote for the country's next prime minister landing on a Monday. While Carney has been a public figure for decades, many Canadians are just getting to know him. CBC News chief political correspondent Rosemary Barton now with some of his most notable career milestones.
This is no time for politics as usual.
Mark Carney pitched himself as an outsider, not a politician, but someone who would have the skills needed to meet the moment.
No, it's not the time for lifelong politicians such as Pierre Poilievre.
He was born in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, raised in Edmonton. His father, Bob, ran for the Liberals, coming in second to the Progressive Conservatives. Carney studied economics abroad. For 13 years, he worked for global investment banking firm Goldman Sachs, before holding several senior positions at the Bank of Canada and in the finance department in Ottawa. In 2008, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper appointed Carney to run the Bank of Canada, the second youngest bank governor ever.
Some of the world's largest financial institutions have recorded substantial losses.
Amid the global financial crisis, Carney called for widespread reforms to the world's financial system.
Double hats now as the head of the International Financial Stability Board.
Working alongside Harper Conservatives, Carney was credited for how well Canada weathered the financial storm compared to other nations. Even named as one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people in 2010.
Canada has shone, relatively speaking, in the world during the period of time in which Governor Carney has served as the governor of the Bank of Canada.
In 2013, Carney became the governor of the Bank of England, becoming the first ever foreigner to be named to that role. He later agreed to stay on at the helm for 2 extra years to help ease the Brexit transition. More recently, Carney worked for investment firm Brookfield Asset Management, served as the United Nations Special Envoy on Climate Action.
2/3 of carbon being priced by the end of the decade.
For years, he supported a carbon tax, only to walk away from the policy at the start of the leadership race.
Why don't I become a circus clown? I mean, it's like...
For more than a decade, Carney toyed with the idea of running for the top job of the Liberal Party.
I have gainful employment, and I intend to continue it.
In 2020, Prime Minister Trudeau tapped Carney to serve as an informal advisor on the government's pandemic recovery plan.
Mark Carney!
He immediately became a front-runner in the leadership race when Trudeau resigned earlier this year. He has never held public office, but Liberals bought his pitch. Now he will have to convince Canadians.
Let's get some analysis now from CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. So, Rosie, a rookie politician becomes prime minister. What does Carney need to do to prove he can handle the job?
Well, he's done part of that already just tonight, Ian. This overwhelming victory, winning in every riding of the country, certainly gives him the strong mandate that he needs now to go forward and make some critical decisions for government and for the country. You know, this is a test, the first test that he's passed, and that was winning over Liberal support. The next test will be winning over Canadian support. Part of what his speech did tonight, though, was introduce himself to Canadians and try to unite them in the face of Donald Trump by saying he is the only one that can do that Pierre Poilievre taps into the divisions of the country in a way that Mark Carney does it. So you can already see him lying down some of the battle lines here that will be needed in an election campaign. But the win is really the big part of what he had to do, and the rest is still to come.
And what are you hearing about how quickly there could be a transition of control of this government?
So he will first have to be sworn in as prime minister. That should happen in a matter of days. It's the next piece that's kind of interesting, what a cabinet would look like. We're hearing that it will be way pared down, 20, 25 people. Some of the people will be cabinet ministers already in place in order to keep that Donald Trump relationship with the administration going. And some could even be people who are not elected outside of cabinet, who are brought in to create kind of a wartime cabinet to approach the tariff threats. The next piece then, obviously, Ian, is how quickly Mark Carney wants an election. And because he doesn't have a seat and because he wants a mandate, you heard a whole bunch of Liberals here tonight asking for one very quickly, something they would not have wanted just 2 months ago. So things are about to get pretty darn busy on the political landscape in this country, Ian.
Well, it's pretty darn busy for you today. Great work, Rosie. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you.
And Rosie will be back in about 20 minutes along with the Ad Issue crew to help break down Carney's win and the road to the next election. Mark Carney will lead a party that has sprung back to life in the polls, starting when Justin Trudeau announced he was resigning. The big Liberal slide goes back to May 2023, when the Conservatives led by less than 3 points. That gap began to widen week after week, month after month. Early in January, the Conservatives led by a staggering 24 points, but that was also the day Trudeau announced he would step down as leader and prime minister. Since then, the Conservative lead has narrowed. As of last week, it was less than 10 points. So let's hear what people are saying about the choice of Carney to lead the Liberals into the next election. Lisa Shing has rounded up reaction from party supporters, political rivals, and the voters Carney hopes to win over.
Elation for Mark Carney within the Liberal Party and mixed feelings among some Canadians.
I'm excited for the new skill sets he can bring in.
I wouldn't give him much hope, or the country much hope, if he's our next leader.
We could have better options, but right now that's who we have, and I think he's pretty good.
The new Liberal leader and Prime Minister-designate coming in during a critical trade war with the U.S.
Who's ready to put Canada first?
Even before Carney's win, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre already on the attack at a packed rally. He likened Carney to Justin Trudeau and blamed him for the rising cost of living.
Sneaky Mark Carney's going to try to pull a fast one on you.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh posting on X, "We will disagree on many ideas, priorities, and policies, but we should always stand united in protecting our country." Polls suggest many voters like this deli owner want a leader who's equipped to take on Donald Trump.
I don't think this change will make much of a difference. We need someone in there that can actually stand up to him, because we're just getting bullied around.
Others say the former governor of the Bank of Canada and Bank of England is best positioned to fight a trade war.
Who do you think is better suited to take on the situation from the South?
If you had asked me in December, it would have been Pierre Poilievre. If you ask me today, I'm not quite sure, frankly.
Why not?
Because I think Mark Carney has the better credentials that we might need.
I voted Liberal in the past. I voted Conservative in the past. But I'd like to see somebody who can bring Canada together and deal with the economic threats that we're having with the U.S. right now. And I think Carney is the guy.
So I think we do agree that Poilievre is a good candidate. I just think Carney's better.
Voters who now see Canada's political landscape in a whole new light. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
As you've heard, one of Carney's first challenges will be standing up to Donald Trump, who's poised to slam Canada with new tariffs on steel and aluminum on Wednesday. Katie Simpson now with the next deadline in this trade war and the pushback here at home.
Unpredictable as ever, the U.S. president muddying the waters even further on his tariff plans, despite complaints from business leaders seeking stability.
We may go up with some tariffs. It depends. We may go up. I don't think we'll go down, but we may go up. But they have plenty of clarity. They just use it. That's like almost a soundbite.
Canada's border security enhancements are not good enough, the Trump administration says, as it continues to make cryptically broad demands.
If fentanyl ends, I think these will come off. But if fentanyl does not end, or he's uncertain about it, they will stay this way until he is comfortable.
While Donald Trump's advisors make false and exaggerated claims to justify the tariffs.
We launched a drug war, not a trade war, and it was part of a negotiation to get Canada and Mexico to stop shipping fentanyl across our borders.
Steel and aluminum are the next industries to be targeted. Starting Wednesday, the Trump administration plans to impose new, separate 25% tariffs on both.
We want to be in a position that we were in 2 weeks ago, where we were exporting and importing from the United States without tariffs.
In a dizzying start to his second term, Trump has threatened, paused, threatened, imposed, made more threats, and offered exemptions on tariffs. Policy changes he stands by despite growing concerns.
Are you expecting a recession this year?
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing.
The next big thing arrives in April. The Trump administration will roll out what it calls reciprocal tariffs, taking aim at countries that impose tariffs on U.S. goods and have policies they feel are unfair to American businesses. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The U.S. trade war has reopened old debates over new pipelines in Canada, but as the country looks to secure its energy resources, there's a push for renewables to remain part of the plan. Sam Sampson on the competing ideas to make Canada's energy sector more resilient.
On the job, it's safety first. On the books, a hazard could be on the horizon, with potential U.S. tariffs already causing project cancellations for this Edmonton-based solar panel company.
These are major purchases with long-term financing, and that uncertainty creates risk for people. They don't want to spend money that they potentially might not have down the road.
He worries tariffs could change residential green reno funding, since many programs across Canada are subsidized through government grants and loans.
If things are not looking good, that's something they could easily take off the table.
And it's not just solar. Canada could face a 10% tariff on energy imports to the States, the country that buys the most Canadian crude oil. Recent polling shows 2/3 of people asked would support a cross-Canada pipeline to get more oil to the coasts and sell to other countries.
Pretty simple, really. A project like Energy East is possible. It's a fact.
That is a bit of a distraction at this moment in time.
Advocates of clean energy say now is the time to capitalize on green infrastructure, like making hydro, solar, and wind power easier to share between provinces.
We need to be really pragmatic and not following Trump down the path of, drill baby drill and really trying to take the United States sort of backwards.
The International Energy Agency projects global oil demand will peak within a decade. Some say Canada can invest in green energy without bailing on oil.
We've got to improve our environmental performance, absolutely. And we've got to continue to steward and produce this resource because the world needs it. And if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it, and we'll miss out on all kinds of wealth.
The people we spoke with say this will be a three-part federal election issue. How can Canada improve its energy security and stay true to its climate change commitments and make money? Sam Sampson, CBC News, Edmonton.
Trump's tariffs are also affecting Americans living in a small border town and wholly reliant on Canadian business.
We can't do without Canada's support. We won't exist.
We head to the unique border town to speak with residents, hoping for some relief. Some Canadians are getting scammed when buying a gift card.
And once you activate it, they have the ability to go in and drain the funds from that card.
CBC's Go Public investigates how criminal gangs are involved. And
elbows up, elbows up.
Canadians taking a page from hockey and getting ready for a fight.
Elbows up, folks.
We're back in 2. Police in Toronto are still looking for the 3 people responsible for one of the city's worst mass shootings. 3 masked men armed with an assault rifle and 2 handguns entered a busy East End pub Friday night. Police say they opened fire indiscriminately into the crowd of patrons. 7 people shot, 5 others injured by flying glass. The brazen violence has area residents shaken.
I think it's crazy that the crime is just getting out of control in Toronto overall, and I just don't know if we're going to get better.
Police say they'll maintain a strong presence in the area while their investigation continues. The RCMP says it's working with international partners to crack down on scams, one of which drains money from gift cards and is costing Canadians millions. Go Public's Ithil Musa now on how thieves are doing it and what you should look out for to avoid getting ripped off.
Joan Owens bought this $50 Lululemon gift card for her sister-in-law last October. But when it came time to use it, she says it was completely empty.
I was surprised. I said, the receipt is there. It says it's activated.
Owens' gift card, purchased at this Shoppers Drug Mart, was likely drained of funds by fraudsters. One way they do this is by stealing gift cards from a store, obtaining the account information on the back and resealing the cards in their original packaging before placing them back in the store for unsuspecting customers to purchase.
And once you activate it, they have the ability to go in and drain the funds from that card.
The $50 gift card.
Martin Paquette knows all about it. The $50 Sephora gift card he bought his daughter at Walmart also turned out to have no money on it when she went to use it.
My daughter was embarrassed, to say the least.
Gift card scams are also a widespread problem in the United States, where law enforcement officials have linked some of that activity to Chinese organized crime groups, who they say are also stealing from Canadians.
They're taking the money to then convert it into goods. Primarily, those goods are going to be high dollar, luxury items. Apple product in particular is highly sought after.
The RCMP says it's sharing information with local, national, and international law enforcement partners to combat fraud. Martin Paquette says he's learned his lesson.
If we ever buy gift cards again, we will definitely go to the store that is issuing the gift card.
Joan, on the other hand,
I stay away from gift cards now.
After Go Public contacted Walmart Canada and Shoppers Drug Mart, they said they compensated Martin and Joan for their lost funds. Both companies say they train their employees to spot the telltale signs of gift card tampering. But consumers should also pay close attention to avoid the unintended gift of fraud. Ithil Musa, CBC News, Toronto.
Our Go Public stories come from you, so if you have a tip for the team to investigate, email gopublic@cbc.ca. We want to return to our top story. Mark Carney will be Canada's next Prime Minister after being chosen as the new leader of the Liberal Party.
So let me ask you, who's ready? Who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
But can he take on Trump? And are we headed for an election soon? Rosie's here with a special edition of At Issue. And the American border town hoping Canada doesn't abandon them.
And 90% of our economic activity comes from British Columbia.
We speak with residents about the trade war and its deep cuts. The National breaks down the stories shaping our world. Next. The toll of Trump's trade war is already being felt in a small Washington state community just south of Vancouver. Point Roberts is on the southern tip of a peninsula cut off by the Canada-U.S. border, and that means some supplies heading into town now face tariffs. With a population of just over 1,000 people, Point Roberts also relies on Canadian visitors to stay afloat. Yvette Bren now on a beachfront community stuck in the middle of a trade war.
U.S. and Canadian citizens have been intertwined in Point Roberts for more than 100 years. Many Canadians come here for cheap gas, groceries, or the seaside. But the trade war has slowed that traffic to a trickle, cutting border crossings almost in half.
If I don't do well in the next few months here, I might have to close my doors. It's very sad.
Cafe manager Ailish Wallace says U.S. tariffs have turned off tourists.
Sad, angry, frustrated. Hopeful that, it'll turn itself around and we won't have this continued stress and pressure.
The trade war has slowed investment and building. So her husband, a contractor, is forced to leave his family and head to Hawaii, where he can earn a living by helping rebuild after fires there.
We want to keep our home.
We can't do without Canada's support. We won't exist.
This man is fighting for the community his grandmother settled in. He's petitioning Canada to exempt Point Roberts from any retaliatory taxes or tariffs.
And 90% of our economic activity comes from British Columbia. 90%. Take that away and say we're not coming to Point Roberts anymore. We're done. We're done.
This community relies on Canada for business, electricity, even water. The community is so Canadian-friendly, gas is sold by the liter. Pandemic restrictions hit Point Roberts hard. Tariffs for some may be the final blow.
It's all Canadians who are buying the gas.
Canadian Bob Cook acknowledges the tension.
People in Canada are outraged. They feel like they've been attacked, and they're just furious.
But he says he's still standing by his neighbor.
I'm not going to boycott Point Roberts. These are my friends here.
So he's doing what he can to push back on the paradigm shift by showing up for old friends. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Point Roberts, Washington.
Now let's break down the big story today. Mark Carney has become the new Liberal leader and slated to be the next Prime Minister. Rosie's here to tackle that on a special edition of At Issue.
At issue, Liberal leadership. After weeks of campaigning, the Liberals have elected a new leader to replace Justin Trudeau.
We're all being called to stand up for each other and for the Canadian way of life. So let me ask you, who's ready? Pierre, who's ready to stand up for Canada with me?
But with a trade war between the U.S. and Canada and an opposition eager for an election, what's next for the new leader and Prime Minister-designate? Hello there, I'm Rosemary Barton, and we're joining you from the Liberal Leadership Convention floor here to discuss the results, the big Mark Carney win. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Everybody here in person, delighted to have you all here. We'll start with the results. I'm going to start down here to shake it up. Althea, what did you make of the overwhelming victory by Mark Carney?
I was surprised it was that high. I had seen some of the numbers of people who had voted and identified Carney supporters, but he was even higher than I expected it would be. The fact that he won every single riding in the country is kind of insane. But I think it speaks to the moment. They wanted to pick a winner, and polls suggested that he could win, not just that he would win the Liberal leadership handily, but that he could win a general election.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Pierre Poilievre won every riding in his leadership contest as well, or almost every riding. Anyway,
I don't remember.
Andrew, what did you make of the win, the size of the win?
This is a party that is looking for a savior, the same way they found a savior with Justin Trudeau in 2015, 2013, I guess, was the leadership. And this is the guy who they think is their lunch ticket. And it's pretty clear the party has identified that pretty fully. You can see why some of these cabinet ministers, I'm sure that was also because they wanted to serve their country, but they could also probably read where the party was headed and didn't want to get in the way of this juggernaut.
Chantal.
Well, those who didn't read it, Chrystia Freeland got crushed in the process. 8% is a devastating result for someone who's been Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, has led big files in the previous government. Karina Gould, barely better than the complete outsider to this campaign. So basically, Mark Carney is in charge. The Liberals have bought into him. They will fail or succeed with him, but there will be no second guessers. No. Between now and voting day. What happens after, as you know, is always another story. But I'm not sure I've seen a result of this magnitude, especially for someone
who's never who is an outsider. Yeah. And maybe that ultimately was the appeal, that he could offer change for a party that wanted change without having to, I don't know, upend everything, Andrew.
Yes. Now, the speech, however, he certainly went beyond just, I'm the cool technocrat, I'm the guy who knows economic policy. I was struck by the, frankly, brutality of some of the language. Not only talking about Donald Trump, but talking about the Americans as being the Americans want our resources. The Americans, we're going to keep our tariffs until the Americans show us respect. It's a country that can't be trusted. That's remarkable language for a Prime Minister-designate of the country, if that's the right term to be using. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm wholly comfortable with it. It's one thing for a hot-headed newspaper columnist to write with that. But for a Prime Minister to be talking that, he's playing a bit with fire. Point one. Point two is the way he talked about Pierre Poilievre, to be saying that he worships at the altar of Donald Trump and would kneel before him. is pretty remarkably forceful language. I'm not sure I'm terribly comfortable with that, basically saying he'd sell out the country. But this is the kind of election we're going to be in.
Pierre Poilievre said that very thing about Mark Carney 2 days ago. So, you know, like...
They're going to be giving back and forth. I'm not saying this one part or the other, but it's going to be a brutal election.
There's not going to be a Mr. Nice on this ballot from any of the four main leaders. But the main two leaders, I think the Liberals in the room reacted positively to this because that's what they want. For 2 years, Pierre Poilievre has been throwing insults at them, as he has with other leaders. And that someone is standing up and saying, I'm not going to get pushed around by this aggressive politician. It's kind of interesting to watch from the perspective of the people who voted for him. I think he delivered the speech that they wanted to hear. And the French was okay.
Althea. It was his best speech so far of any of the speeches. And yes, his French was good. Well, mostly good. I would say, though, that I think he drew some lines that he needed to draw. But there's a risk because I think if we're, as we expect, there will be a conservative bombardment of ads against Mark Carney, probably as of right now. Not that there weren't already, but it's hard to go above that when you're trying to be positive. And he tried to suggest that he was going to be positive, and then he levied, some of the things that Andrew talked about, worships at the altar of Donald Trump's and the contrast ads that they want to have with Donald Trump. But I do think like the lines that he drew are noteworthy. One being this idea that we all have to unify behind one candidate, and that candidate will be him. We need to unify as a country, but he was talking about himself basically, and that we cannot be divided like the Americans. And I think that speaks to a lot of Canadians.
I think so,
And then I do think that the way he talked about himself and his own experience is a way of protecting himself against perhaps the lack of experience he has as a political candidate, in saying that Mr. Poilievre, is an ideologue, basically, and he doesn't really understand how the economy works, but that I, as Mark Carney, have all this experience, and I can lead us to the promised land and fix all our problems.
Can I just say, we need to be united in the face of this threat. We should not translate that into saying you can only vote for one party. And I'm really uncomfortable with that kind of language as well. That's what Doug Ford was peddling. It worked for him.
It worked.
It worked, but it's not a particularly democratic message.
No, but interestingly, he did talk about the Americans and Donald Trump, but he talked about Pierre Poilievre, not so much the Conservatives. And to win this election, the Liberals are going to need to get voters from the NDP, which at this point they are doing. By the way, if I were the New Democrats, I would be worried about Karina Gould's results, because she appealed to what could be the NDP side or the left flank of the Liberal Party, and no one came. Not even, New Democrats who could have signed up to do this. You look at the polls, you look at this result, and what you see is Canadians are going to be polarized between two options. They're going to have to choose, and they're choosing between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney to deal with Donald Trump. That's basically where we're going.
Donald Trump has given the Liberals a gift because they can run in both directions at the same time. Carney can tack to the right on policy to satisfy people, people who thought the Liberals went too far left, but he can also reel in New Democratic voters by saying, I'm the only one who can protect you from the Americans. So he's been given a gift.
And look what happened to the climate side of the cabinet. They all lined up behind Mark Carney, who very early on said, I'm going to scrap the carbon tax that you went to war for. And still they rallied to him. Why? Because he has shown more interest in the climate policy, of course, than Pierre Poilievre.
Or Chrystia Freeland.
Or yes, exactly. Yes. But they did it with ease. They're going around here very happy with the outcome, not worried about that agenda.
The reaction in the room when he announced, he was, not announced, but said again he was going to scrap the carbon tax and scrap the capital gains increase was really interesting, hearing them applaud for something they had only just brought in.
Although not Justin Trudeau. I did look very closely. He didn't applaud Althea.
Yeah, well, I could understand why he wouldn't, because that's basically his legacy.
Thing,
I think the NDP is going to target certain ridings, like we saw in Ontario, and I think that's going to be their, save the furniture strategy. On the tacking more to the right, which clearly he even suggested in his speech, the language that he used around pharmacare, he said, for those who need it. That is different language than what Justin Trudeau has suggested that the direction that he's going in. So you already see that there's a movement going while still mentioning pharmacare and dental care. So you keep, core Liberals, and these are the things we ran on, and these are the things that are quite popular when you ask caucus members. There's definitely a movement more towards the center right.
Okay, we're going to pause it right there if we can. We're going to keep the conversation going, though, and we'll discuss the larger implications, what this might mean for election timing, forming a cabinet, the transition, all of that. Stick around. More at issue right after this. Welcome back here to the convention floor of the Liberal Leadership Convention to talk more about the win for Mark Carney and what it means for Canadian politics. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea. Before we go to what has to happen next, I want to take one round to talk about what happened to Chrystia Freeland. 8% of the vote, devastating loss for someone who started this, and obviously thought she had a chance.
Me, I think she should have pulled out. If her people were good enough to figure out where this was going, after the debates, she should have just stepped back, because there were two bad outcomes that were possible for her. Finishing third didn't happen, but finishing at 8% is almost worse. What that means is that when cabinet gets made, which will happen soon, I believe that there will be a spot for her, but she won't be able to negotiate that spot. She's going to have to take whatever is on offer, and it will not be foreign affairs or finance.
No. Andrew?
She may have felt she needed to take one for the team. Having taken down the Prime Minister, which some people would be congratulating her for, some people would be holding her against her, to then pull out of the race, I don't know. It might have looked
well,
bad.
Mark Carney did.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
And didn't lose
But he
face.
wasn't carrying the same baggage she was.
No.
So I don't know. It obviously it's a humiliating thing. I was frankly thinking she might be humiliated further by finishing third.
Yeah.
I thought Karina Gould, it seemed like, was going to. I thought Chrystia Freeland was going to be caught in between the people who were voting for Carney because he could win, and for Karina Gould because she represented old school liberalism.
Yeah.
But Karina Gould didn't do very well either. So.
Althea?
I had heard talk during the early days of the leadership race of offering Chrystia Freeland an exit round, because some people were worried about the blows that Mr. Carney might have in a debate.
Yeah.
And clearly, they did not need to worry. And she seemed herself to have pivoted in that moment. I think she grossly underestimated the support that she had in caucus. She told cabinet colleagues that she would not put their money in her budget because she didn't want to affect her numbers, but to ask for her after the fact, and she would find the funding for it. So there were people who felt that she didn't have their back and frankly was operating in ways that she should not have been operating. And caucus members felt that she was snobby, didn't respond to their messages.
Yeah.
And even though she changed some of those tactics in the later years, caucus members have long memories.
People remember things.
And I think that that's why there was nobody behind her when she looked back. And you can't be a leader if there's nobody willing to follow you.
Okay, what has to happen next? He'll be sworn in as Prime Minister probably in a couple of days.
Which will be extra quick for a transition. We usually do these things over 2 weeks. I believe that the transition has already started.
Oh, it has. Yeah,
behind the scenes.
for sure. But it's still very fast for this kind of thing.
But the only way to do this by midweek, and I think no one expects that cabinet swearing in to not happen this week, is very quick.
So that means you leave some people in the same jobs, I would think.
Yes,
you get rid of some jobs.
But the Carney team has already made it clear they want to cut this cabinet by half to have about 20 ministers, and who will like that. But that means you've got to, figure out what you keep, how it works, and what happens to those portfolios that you're basically throwing out the window. They're not always big, but you need to fit them somewhere.
Yeah, or not, or maybe you say this is a wartime cabinet and we're only going to deal with this set of issues for
yes,
now.
and then someone says you didn't do official languages.
Oh, you put that back in heritage where it belongs.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah.
And I got 86% of the vote. he has a freer hand than probably any leader in Canadian history to bring in a cabinet that's actually a cabinet rather than just a free-for-all to reward every constituency in the country. So I hope he makes good on that. We'll see. We'll see how long that stays in the case. Everyone's saying he's going to go to election right away, and I understand the arguments for that, because don't give the Conservatives time to define them and all these things. I also think there's some case to be made, just from a Liberal standpoint, of establishing himself as a prime minister and stamping his authority on the party and on the country. There are benefits to that in terms of, otherwise he's just this kind of strange guy that nobody really knows.
Well, I have heard one of the first things he's going to do is stop the carbon tax so it doesn't go into effect on April 1st. He could do something like that without having to have Parliament.
They've been looking for the way to do this, to stop the increase.
The greatest gift, though, that Mr. Carney gets, frankly, is that he gets to be prime minister during Donald Trump causing chaos. So maybe they won't be in place for the steel and aluminum tariffs, but he will be in place for the April 2nd reciprocity tariffs. And he gets to go to Washington, or he gets to make speeches and try to bring the country together. And so he doesn't need to wait, because he gets to be this dual role at the same time, showcasing what he would be like as prime minister.
Like Doug Ford did.
But exactly. And he gets to say, I'm not on the campaign trail because I'm dealing
because
with
I need to deal with this crisis at hand. On the cabinet size, so I did this experience over the weekend, and I can get down to 19 portfolios. So I'm sure whoever is in the prime minister's office and on the transition team can easily do this. Basically, Justin Trudeau had swollen the size of cabinet by giving ministers of state or parliamentary secretary jobs and made them actual cabinet minister jobs. I don't think that's an issue. I think the bigger issue is, who does he keep in what positions? Because, Dominic LeBlanc has the best connections to Howard Lutnick in the United States. He's by far the most valuable cabinet minister. But do you keep him at finance? How much do you reflect change, and how much do you keep the people that you need, who have a skill set that you need, at least in the transition period? And then do you bring in any star candidates? Do you bring in people who do not have a seat because you're trying to show that you can attract other people? I think that's going to be interesting to watch this week.
Don't forget, not all those ministers are a burden on the government. Dominic LeBlanc plays well in Atlantic Canada, plays well in Quebec, does well in Ontario, is a friend of Premier Ford. So when you look at this, you say, I'm not going to push this guy away in the name of change, but I too am curious to see if we will see people who are currently unelected join this war cabinet. And if they do, I assume they will not all be traditional Liberals.
That would be interesting to see if there's any Conservatives in the mix.
And so, in election timing, then, what is your best? You all hate doing guesses, but if your most informed speculation would be what?
Before May 15th.
But the election happens before May. Okay. What about
you mean the call?
What about the call? The red drop.
Not this week. Next week.
Next week.
2 weeks. And how long is it?
37 days minimum.
7 weeks.
They need to take into account the Easter break. Otherwise, they would be even shorter.
The shorter the campaign, the less the Conservative money advantage would play to their benefit.
Well, actually, it's the same amount of money, no matter the length of the campaign. So
but the longer the campaign, the more that you can build up impressions.
Between now and the call.
Okay, and I 45 seconds. The one thing Pierre Poilievre has to do.
Get himself a team starting with someone who would look like Jim Flaherty or Paul Martin or Michael Wilson. Do I need to go through the list?
Quickly.
Look like a prime minister.
Stop worrying about the far right.
Well, there you go. Okay. It's so much easier to do in person because you can interrupt each other. I know when to talk to you. I know when you'd want to be quiet. Anyway, thank you. So we're going to see each other perhaps more often than usual. It's going to be a wild ride. Thank you all for
you'll have us in studio for election night?
Yes, and also that. Yes. Chantal Hiver, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for that. That is at issue from the Liberal Leadership Convention, a real historic moment for this country. And as you all heard from our friends here, the beginning of a wild political ride and undoubtedly a federal election for all of you much sooner than you thought. And with that, I'll throw things back to Ian in Vancouver.
Sounded great, Rosie. Coming up, Canadians are pushing back against Trump with a new rallying cry.
Mike sent the message, and I've been hearing it all day. Elbows up, elbows up, elbows up.
How a Canadian comedy icon may have sparked a movement. Next. in our moment. Mike Myers made headlines with this "Canada is not for sale" t-shirt during an appearance on Saturday Night Live. But his elbows up gesture has caught on in a big way. The slogan is spreading among Canadians who are pushing back against Donald Trump's tariffs and threats of annexation. So tonight, Canada's fighting spirit is our moment.
Just want to say, elbows up, folks.
Elbows up.
We're keeping our elbows up, bud.
In response to Donald Trump's threats on our economy and sovereignty, the Elbows Up movement is catching fire online, inspired by a Canadian comedy icon. That's Canada's Mike Myers on Saturday Night Live, making the distinctive gesture and mouthing that rallying cry, "Elbows up." If it looks familiar, he did it a week earlier. The message is catching on with everyday Canadians and elected politicians.
Elbows up.
It's elbows up time. We will never kiss the gangster's ring.
The term goes back to Mr. Hockey himself, Gordie Howe.
Gordie was the sweetest guy on the planet, but when Gordie did elbows up, it meant people got black eyes and people lost teeth.
Now, as Donald Trump tries to force Canada into a corner, Canadians seem to be taking an expat celebrity's lead to show they're ready for a fight.
Mike sent the message, and I've been hearing it all day. Elbows up, elbows up, elbows up.
So the added benefit of all of this is for Canadians who either aren't hockey fans or maybe are too young, are learning all about Gordie Howe and his, he great hockey player, great scorer, but also, as you heard, loved to use his elbows. And if you don't know about Gordie Howe, look up the Gordie Howe hat trick. Thank you for being with us. I'm Ian Hanomansing in Vancouver. See you tomorrow night on CBC News Network at 7 p.m. Eastern. Good night.